Good evening, everyone, and Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas. As we have that lovely roaring fire going and the snow is flying out there, it puts you all in the mood for hot chocolate and mistletoe and all the rest of the trappings that come with Christmas. It's a joy and delight. I know my esteemed colleague, Mr. Riedl, in the back there was shoveling this morning, you know. I mean, it's out there huffing and puffing, red cherry cheeks and a shiny skull, you know. So it's really been doing a great deal for us all and putting us in the mood, eh? Anyway, I welcome you all here tonight. What I want to do in this talk is not tell you about the entire history of the holiday, not to talk to you about the collectability of ornaments or anything of that nature, because that doesn't really have any kind of ties to Watertown. And I am known as a Watertown historian. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bill Jannke. For those of you that do know me, I'm surprised you're still sitting in the room here. But there you are. So tonight, it'll be kind of an informal little trip down memory lane, telling you a little bit of the lighter history here of Christmas celebrations in the city over the years. And we'll start with showing some slides, and then I have something rather special after they're done to share with you all, and then you can all scamper off and be grateful that you have gotten away with your lives. Okay, so if you have any comments or questions about anything, or want to correct me, please do so. I'm happy to be corrected because that's how I learn. And so we should have a good time, I think, tonight. Mr. Riedl is at the Hammond organ here, and so he'll be working the slides for me tonight. We actually are in the presence of two eminent historians, and I joke about it, but I have Mr. Riedl sitting in the back, and he is one of our preeminent historians in Watertown. And Mr. Riedl is also an excellent resource. He's written two very excellent books that if you are looking for Christmas presents to give to people, I urge you to look into them. The one being The History of the Watertown Fire Department, which is a thick volume that contains histories of all the major fires that ever took place here in the city from 1857, actually even pre-1857, on up through the early part of this century. It's an excellent resource, and I use it on a regular basis. He also is the preeminent historian for St. Henry's Church. So I'm extremely grateful to him that he is here tonight and able to assist me in any way that he possibly can. In fact, he might take over the talk at some point because it might be more interesting hearing it from Ken than from me, but there you are. As for me, I don't know what the talk is like because I haven't heard it yet. So I really hope it's good. I never know what I'm going to say until I open my mouth, and that's not a very good way to run a railroad, but that's how I conduct business. So, without further ado, if you wouldn't mind catching the light switches there right by the coffee maker, and I'll just take a seat here, and we'll show some slides. We start out with this 1907 image of a typical Christmas tree of that time period, just to put us all in the mood. And here you can see some of the gifts hanging from the tree, the cornucopias and the glass ornaments, and of course, lit with candles, a highly dangerous thing, but if you have ever seen a tree lit with candles, it is really a one-of-a-kind experience. They're really, very lovely. Christmas in Watertown really begins in 1836. Next slide, if you would, Mr. Riedl. It began with Timothy Johnson, who you see here, who is our city's founder. He happened upon what is now Watertown in the spring of 1836. And he set about most of the year with a few other men in clearing land, laying out a road and things of that nature. And then in the fall of 1836, he sent word to his wife, who was in Ohio, to pack up the children and all the household goods and come up here to the Wisconsin Territory. And he was going to bring her to his new settlement, named for himself Johnson's Rapids, which is what our city's name was at that time period. Although we weren't a city, of course, at that time. So she packed up the house. They headed on a stagecoach, excuse me, to Chicago. And from there they caught a sailboat up the river and landed at Milwaukee Harbor in the early part of November. Timothy Johnson and his crew met them at the Milwaukee docks, and they began to make their trek here to Johnson's Rapids, to Watertown. It took them from the beginning of November until December 10th before the family finally were able to get through and reach Watertown. Now, remember, of course, at this time there were no roads, so it was blazed trails or Indian fords, and there was heavily forested timber around the area, so it made it somewhat impassable in spots. Plus, there was a lot of swampy areas around here. So it took quite a bit of time to get through, but it was well worth it because Mrs. Johnson, when she got here, she was expecting to find at least a snugly, nicely little built log cabin, but instead what she got was a lean-to shanty located along what is now North First Street parking lot in Watertown. And not only was it a lean-to shanty, but it was also being shared by 3 men who were working at building a dam across the Rock River. So the family all held up in one side of a blanket partition, and then the workmen lived on the other side. And this is where their first home in Watertown in 1836, and this is where their first Christmas celebration took place. Now you can imagine that it was a very simple celebration. A few Bible readings. Timothy Johnson was a Methodist, and he was a strong supporter of Methodism. They maybe made, Mrs. Johnson perhaps got some flour together and made a few biscuits, and they probably had some dried pork and some whatever food they could spare. There probably wasn't any other gifts, but at least they had themselves. They were all safe and sound and together at Christmas time. And in the long run, is that not the best thing that you can hope at Christmas time, or any time for that matter? Next slide, please, Mr. Riedl. This is Watertown in 1842. It's our main street. It's recognizable, is it not?
Yeah.
Our bridge, the Main Street Bridge, would have gone through between the 2 major buildings there, the 2-story, one to the left there. That's actually the first store building in Watertown, located on the corner of 2nd and Main Streets. The south side was Wertz's paint and floor covering on that site for many, many years. Across the way from it, though, was the first commercial structure on the street, and that was the Exchange Hotel, built in 1840. That's right there. It was moved from that location of 1st and Main to its present location, because it still stands. Today it is the M&M Bar.
Yeah.
You will come to find out, ladies and gentlemen, if you study Watertown history long enough, that if it isn't a bar now, it was a bar then. And if it wasn't a bar then, and it isn't a bar now, it's a parking lot. My next book, which I'm feverishly working on at this point, because I've written several books on Watertown history, is going to be Picturesque Parking Lots in Watertown. There you go. I expect it to be a bestseller. I really do. Anyway, you can imagine that Christmases were celebrated for many years rather simply, because we just did not have the wherewithal for you to go out to a store and buy anything. The nearest store from Watertown would have been Milwaukee, which meant about a week's travel sometimes, depending upon the weather, to get to Milwaukee, or almost as long, if not longer, to get to Chicago or Madison. It wasn't until 1841 that the first store opened on Main Street by John and Luther Cole. But even then, it was your basic goods. They did not sell a lot of fancy finery that you could give out as Christmas gifts. So people made do with homespun things, knitted scarves, and mittens, and socks, and things of that nature. Or perhaps they would stop and pause and prepare a meal, or just take a day to reflect and enjoy the company. Because otherwise, you can imagine, as a pioneer, it was a pretty round-the-clock job of making sure that you were able to stay alive, getting your house built, your crops put in, your animals tended to, etc. Next slide, please, Mr. Riedl. The one thing that we always had in Watertown, though, and Watertown's not alone, we've always had it, is snow. Now, I know that there are a few of you here that are missing the snow very desperately. I personally, after 54 years of experiencing snow, prefer to look at it like this instead of looking at it out the window. Now, I will clarify my remark on that by saying that the first snow of the year is pretty. A little snow on Christmas Eve is delightful. But then December 26th, I wanted to melt and go up to 70.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not greedy. I'll let it go up to 65, and it can go up by increments after that. But I really don't want it to go any lower. Now, as I say, snow can be very pretty. Now, this is a picture of Watertown in December of 1985, 30 years ago. Apart from the schmutz on the side there, on the right and left-hand side, it's a pretty look, you know, that kind of gray sky and the snow decorating the fir tree there, you know, the pine tree. It's a very pretty look. Next slide, please, Mr. Riedl. But snow can be extremely destructive. Now, this is Watertown, South 4th, looking northward on Maine. In 1947, during the terrible snowstorm we had at that point, it was a terrible snow because it was bitterly cold and it was so impassable that there was a party of, I think, a family, father, mother, and children, who lost their lives due to exposure by being caught in their car, and they couldn't go any further. There was no such thing as a modern-day plow like we have now. The Biefeld Company, who had their offices on North Water Street, did make snow plows, but generally speaking, they were horse-driven. And so it took a great deal of time to part the snow, as you can see here from this picture. There's not even really, it looks like there might possibly be one lane of traffic on the right-hand side there. The similar snow came through in 1936. That was also disastrous. You all remember, perhaps, the ice storm of 1976, which was eerily beautiful to see, but dangerous as all get out to be out and about in. But the worst possible snow that we ever had in Watertown, next slide please, Mr. Riedl, came in 1881. Now, not at Christmas time, but in March of 1881. The snow was so high that you had to barrel through tunnels on Main Street to get from one side to the other. It washed away, when the ice finally broke up, it washed away Main Street Bridge and taking a building or two with it. It was a phenomenal snow. It stalled railroad engines on the tracks. There were stories of people that the only way they could get out of their houses was to go out of the upper floors, windows, and jump down. People were walking, what they discovered later on was the top of their fence posts, but they couldn't touch them because they were on top of these mounds of snow. Next slide, please. This picture is taken in front of what is today the town cinema. But you can see how tall that is, and you can see the tunnel there with the gentleman sitting, looking through it there. Next slide, please. And another view. This is, of course, Main and First Streets looking to the west. You see that sign with the round head on it there on the right-hand side? That sign is a warning to people traveling too fast on our Main Street Bridge. You are fined $5 for riding your horses too fast across the bridge. Next slide, please. But for the most part, people enjoyed the snow. Especially, they made the best of it, let's put it that way. And so you began to develop winter recreation, winter sports. Sleighing was extremely popular in Watertown from the 1850s and 60s onward. This picture was taken maybe around the late 1890s, early 1900s by Henry Bergman, who was a druggist. I'm not certain where exactly in town that is taken. Perhaps, Mr. Racer, do you have any idea?
I have a copy of that, and it's labeled as South 7th Street, but the house to the left doesn't match. So I too have to re-examine the notes to get it exact.
The house there that this is in front of is a very typical building style for Watertown. It's known as the L shape, where there's a two-story section and a one-story section jutting off to one side. It usually had the dining room and kitchen involved there. But it's a beautiful picture. Puts you right in the mood for snow and for sleighing. Next slide, if you would, mister. This, of course, you had a lot of children enjoy the snow. I'm not certain who this is, but he's out in front of what used to be the Sweeney home, Carl's Hegel up on North Church Street, ready to throw a snowball at you. As someone who's had snowballs thrown at him, I really find no joy in this picture. Really, I don't. Next picture, please. This is the famous ski slide at the Octagon House. This picture is taken probably around 1928 or so. You'll notice that the Octagon House does not have its porches. Its porches were removed about 1923, 1924. Huge deal this was. I mean, next slide if you would. They would come from miles around to ski. Now this is a beautiful picture. Somebody took this with a keen eye. As you look, they're standing on top of the ski slide, and you can see the gentleman coming right down off of the end of the slide. And being so high, with getting that momentum behind them, they were able to shoot and propel themselves straight down the hill, across Concord Avenue, and right there, if you look, you can see the path on the Frozen Rock River, and shoot right over to the other side of the bridge, or the other side of the river. It was the greatest joy of people to come out and do that. You see there are cars down there keeping people at bay from Concord Avenue so that you weren't going to get killed, which unfortunately did happen to two young boys, Hubert and Leonard Bourne, in about 1922 or so. Now this is taken from below the hill looking up at the ski slide and all the children out there. You know, and if you've ever been out to the Octagon House, first of all, we don't have it that clear anymore. There are trees and brush, and that's why there is so much up there now because of the Bourne killing. I mean, they died up there. There's a law on the books that you are not allowed to toboggan and slide down Richards Hill anymore. But in any event, just look at these children running up and down to get up there. I wouldn't stand where that young girl is there because that's right in the middle of the path of somebody coming down. But, you know, people lived dangerously in those days. Next slide, please. And sometimes people just like to sit in the middle of the snow. This is taken in the, that street behind this gentleman is North 8th Street. And that is Professor Ernst of Northwestern College. Taken probably around 1900. Why he is sitting behind our old high school building, which later became the Armory on Main Street, is beyond me, but hey, whatever you enjoy doing, you know. Next slide. Now, we had a lot of skate clubs in Watertown. There were at least three. The Badger Skate Club, which was located near the Brickyard on South 3rd Street, around Clark Park. The Gondolier Club, which was out at Riverside Park. And the Silver Club, which was up, of course, on North Water Street. Skating was an extremely popular sport in Watertown. We had skate clubs, competitive skating. It was really quite important. I don't know as the Rock River freezes that solid anymore that you can even do that. But when I was a kid, they used to go out and skate around by the Boughton Street Bridge, East Division Street Bridge there, and do that. Next slide, if you would. Ice boating on the Rock River was also an extremely popular sport. This was usually propelled just by wind, and it would take you all over the Rock River, the big oxbow, over the dams. It was quite popular. My cousin, the late Elmer Strage, was a big ice boat aficionado in the 1920s. Next slide, if you would, Mr. Riedl, sir. Then somebody got the idea to mechanize an ice boat by putting an airplane propeller onto one. Hey, don't knock it. It really blew their clothes off. It really did. This is taken on the Rock River, and the building behind it is the old ice house, located on just above what is today Breslow's Market. Next slide. Some people made their living off of the river. This is one of our ice businesses, probably the Koloff and Knispel brothers. Klinks were the last to cut ice and sell ice in Watertown. And then about World War II vintage, Frigidaire came in with their refrigerators, or electric refrigerators, and that kind of killed off the ice business. Although there was an ice house in town through the early 1980s, was a boxcar over on West Main Street that was run for many years there. You always went out on the ice in January when the ice was at its thickest. And you cut it with these double-edged saws. And of course you had horses out on the river as well. They would haul the ice out into ice houses. What is today the Watertown Bowl 18 on Katy Street started out its life as an ice house. And when one of the previous owners told me one time when they did some remodeling, they accidentally broke through the floor and found an old cavern underneath it.
Oh, yeah.
And as he told me with a smile on his face, it was his first beer frame.
No.
Because it was a beer cavern, he thought. Next slide. But family was more important at Christmas time. And this is about a 1900 view of a Watertown family taken by Henry Bergman. And you see there they are grouped around a simple tree with the garland on there and the homey ornaments and the framed pictures of ancestors on the wall there. Next slide, please. Now this is Mr. and Mrs. Alex Krieger and their children. This is taken about 1901. They're on their front porch in the town of Emmett, am I correct, Bob?
Right.
Admiring their Christmas tree and some of the gifts that year. It is rare to see pictures like this, and fortunately the Krieger family were a family of photographers. And they really did a lot of photo documenting of just about every aspect of their lives. And this is a very nice picture. They were obviously a very loving and very close family, and it's, you know, to have their children and have the tree out, very nice. Next slide. This is the William Jones family, showing some of the Christmas gifts and a simple tree in their home. William Jones' house is up on the eastern end of Western Avenue, across from our Watertown. Next slide. Now this is the Alex Kriegers on December 24th, 1901, decorating the tree. You see the stockings there, and the simple tree, and they're hanging the ornaments and things. My mother, who grew up in the town of Portland, always remembered how she and her sisters and brother and their mother, my grandmother, would go to church, leaving their father at home. And when they got back home, the tree would be put up and decorated as though Santa Claus had already been. It was typical for that to happen. The trees were not put up almost until the last minute. Next slide, please. Decorations in the house were very simple. This is the Jones home again up on Western Avenue. You can see there are nothing but streamers there, and that's basically their decorations. Alongside William Jones, who was he worked for the gas company in town here. You can see there is an old piano, and on top of it is a Victrola. And it is a cylinder Victrola, because that box there has cylinder records in it to play, and the big horn there. Jerry Kreitzman, this is his grandfather, has a cylinder record player yet that plays as though it was made yesterday. And the records play as though they were made yesterday too. It's wonderful. Next slide, please. Of course, by 1916, things got a little bit more impressive as far as trees go, and all the ornamentation. You can see there hanging off of the fireplace a sort of an accordion paper Santa Claus decoration there. This is the front parlor of the Jones home. Beautiful home. Jerry is such a nice guy, and he was able to loan me this picture to have a copy made of. Next picture, please. Now, for those of you that collect old ornaments, you are by now slathering and drool is dripping, I'm sure. This is a typical display of blown glass ornaments that you found in the Brennecke and Bergman drugstore on Main Street about 1901 or thereabouts. This is how they came. Now, the Woolworth Company, and you remember Woolworths, we had a very fine Woolworth store in town. They were the first to import blown Christmas ornaments, and they became a sensation. And people were buying them right and left, and leaving homemade ornamentation almost in the dust. Homemade ornaments did not make a return engagement until probably the depths of the Depression. And then, of course, there was that sudden resurgence in the 1960s when everybody was buying kits to make, you know, oh, I don't know, chenille dollies and pipe cleaner things, you know. But you can see some of the other cotton batting ornaments hanging on the shelves there. It was really quite a nice display of them. And so if you can find these ornaments today, first of all, It's very rare that a lot of them exist yet because of the thinness and the fine detail on the glass. But if you can find them, they're worth a little bit of money these days, which is why, though I'd like to collect them, I can't afford it. I don't have the money that a lot of people do. Next slide, please. This is one of the first ads that I've seen in a Watertown newspaper for holiday decorations for sale. Mrs. C.T. Lotz, who ran a greenhouse in town here. And they were selling Christmas holly, imported English mistletoe, southern smilax, ferns, etc. I wonder what that etc. looks like, you know? I bet that's a pretty thing.
What's smilax?
Smilax, I believe, was explained to me once that it is sort of a vine, a greeny vine, I believe. Next slide, please. Then, with Thomas Edison coming into fore in 1889, the first electric Christmas tree was put up in around the eastern seaboard, and it wasn't long after that trees began to be lit with electricity instead of candles. This is an early picture of a Watertown Christmas tree from about 1916, showing the electric lights on the tree. And you can imagine in those days those lights were probably about like that and got pretty hot after a point. But they were pretty to see. This is the Jones home again, with their Christmas tree in the parlor. Next. Trees were done very individualistically. This is another Henry Bergman photograph, about 1900. Notice here, this tree is known as a white tree. It's in a little alcove. They've created a little niche with hard cardboard covered in white muslin, and they've hung fake icicles over the top, and they even covered white and behind the tree. This is very popular for a time, and there are pine boughs or pine branches up there as well. Next slide, if you would. The Moravians brought with them several traditions, among them the puts, or fantasy scene that was usually put up underneath a Christmas tree. This is one of the most elaborate put scenes that I've ever seen. It was in Watertown. It was owned by the druggist Robert Brennecke, who was a prominent member of the Moravian Church. And if you look closely, and unfortunately this is a grainy picture, but you can see there are animals. There is running water here. There is real sand and dirt that they put down. It took up almost half of the entire dining room. That is a painted backdrop there. So this was a huge thing. And there's the Christmas tree off to the left. It almost gets lost in this whole symphony of everything else in the room. Smaller versions included, like the next scene. Sometimes just a couple of boxes covered with white fur, fake snow, or as we called it in those days, angel snow or angel hair, which was the absolute worst stuff to work with because it was spun fiberglass. And the little bottle brush trees and the little cardboard houses, which I love those houses. I can't find them anymore, but I love the look of those houses. Very simple, but tasteful. Sometimes they would have an electric train that would run around through it under the tree. A lot of times they would have a fence put up around it to kind of guard the animals and people from getting too close as well. Next scene, please. And of course here we have another modified puts, which is cardboard or wooden cutouts of animals, sort of like Disney characters, and angels off to the side. You can see the chenille swags that are off the tree, the garland there, and the long strands of lead-based tinsel that hung off. And a few of the shiny, bright ornaments on there. The glass ornaments were very popular. They were German-made or Czechoslovakian-made, and they were popular until World War I. And then, of course, anything German was verboten in the United States, and so they no longer imported them. So American-based glassware companies, such as Corningware, turned to the manufacturing of glass ornaments. And you lost some of the delicacies of the old German ornaments, but they were far more durable and quite nice, and of course they got better as the years went by. Next scene, please. Now, from home decorations, we go to city decorations. I love this picture. It's 1929. We're at the intersection of Water and Main. We're looking to the east. You can see Salik's Jewelry Store there, right across the street at the bridge there. Number 1 Main Street. And across the way on the other side is Fisher's Department Store, which was number 2 Main Street, I believe. There's the Bank of Watertown, which is next to it there, which would be to the left of Fisher's. The white building, the tall white building. No, coming this way. The left of the picture.
Where are you?
You're at Fisher's there?
Yep.
Go to the left of Fisher's.
Go to the left.
That's it. That's it right there. And next to that, of course, is Kuzel's hardware store. Kuzel's hardware store, which was a wonderful place to go at Christmas time, because they had an alcove in the back, which was their little toy land, their little toy alcove, and Santa Claus would actually sit there, and they would he would hold court. How often I can remember going into Kuzel's and seeing Santa Claus there. It was really very special.
That store had everything and anything.
Yeah, all right.
Now we cannot put swags like this on Main Street anymore. And do you know why? Because in 1959, they redid our Great White Way with lighting. And they staggered the lighting posts. So they are no longer symmetrical. And that's why we cannot do that. Which is a shame, because they were very pretty. I think Jefferson does this yet, in certain, like the entrance and exit of the city. Well, we used to have, if you remember up till a few years ago, we used to have a sort of swag that said Happy Holidays out on South Church Street by Stimson. Of course, a lot of times it only said Happy Hope, you know, but it was there. Next slide, please. Now this is Main Street in 1930. Now in 1930, the city Watertown Businessmen Association got together and they bought new decorations, new swags. And so you see, before it was circles, now it's stars. This now is the intersection of First and Main looking to the east. The Main Cafe is on the far right over here, and the Olympia Candy Company is right up there. You can just see candy on the outside sign, right there. And of course there's Penny's, which was Coles Hall, and Keck's Furniture is off to the left-hand side over here. That's Penny's right there. That's Coles Hall.
Yeah.
Penny's, which we as children didn't like because it had no toys. Well, it did have Old Man Penny and a painting in there, but that was it, you know. Next slide, please. And this, we go back to about 1929 again. This is again, it's probably Washington Street looking to the east. You can see the library and the Harrow building next to the library there, which is, by the way, part of our Blight district will be ripped down very, very soon, probably. So, but you see the nice snow on the ground and the Model Ts all up and down the street. Next slide, please. This is there. No.
Shoot.
Sometimes history goes forward and backwards. All right, now this is a little bit further. We're looking to the west on Main Street now. This is the intersection of I believe it's 5th and Main, and all the buildings you see there, from the popcorn stand on the corner on up, all is now Associated Bank or First Financial. I never know what the bank's name is now. Is it Associated Bank?
Yes, it's Associated.
That, of course, next to it there, that is the what is now the Washington Inn. It was and you know, that's a stellar place to go. But you'll notice on this now, this is about 1935 or 36. There is no longer a star hanging down from the swag. Next picture, if you would. And then we go back again, maybe to the early 1930s, and this time we're up near Sharp Corner. You can see the old Armory building on the side there on the right, and we're looking back up the street to the west. It was tough work putting those things up. We have home movie footage in color of the men on tall ladders hanging those things up and trying to arrange them on thin strands of wire. Next slide, please. Now, from Main Street, it began to spur people on to decorate their own homes, their exterior of their own homes, in a more animated manner, instead of just putting a candle in their windows. One of the first outdoor decorations was this one, set up by Gus Dare on North Warren Street. This is from 1948. As you can see, he's got a Christmas tree, and he's got a large painted backdrop framed by pine boughs, and he's got wooden cutouts of the three wise men and the big star up at the top there. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we have the Ben Erdman home on Oak Street on the west side of the city. He had a 6-foot tall, I think it's 6 foot, concrete church that was lit up by his home. And this is from 1953.
Bill?
Yes?
That's a miniature version of St. Mark's.
Oh, is it really?
Because it has the 2 short windows on the front, which is now above the enclosure, and the side porch on the north.
Oh, so it does. The newspaper article accompanying it did not say that, but now that you say it, I can see it. You gotta wonder where these things all, whatever happened to these sorts of things, you know? Well, things got stronger and stronger. After World War II, and cheap outdoor lighting was available, you began to see houses really begin to get decorated up to the hilt. When I was a kid, there was a house on Emmett Street, right across from St. Bernard's School. It's an empty lot now. It was a colonial type of looking home, but that house used to be wildly decorated. By today's standards, it would be tame, but back in the 60s and 70s, people kind of would cluck their tongues and go, oh, how garish. Now, but compared to that, and compared to the next picture, I don't think that was garish at all. Now this is the, now I've got the name here, just a moment. This is the Ken Strauss home on 700 South 2nd Street. This gentleman in 1990 won two first prizes in the house decorating contest. The first one was for the front of his house, which was the first prize for best religious lighting display. And the second one, which basically was his backyard that faced Milwaukee Street, was for best fantasy display. It's like yesterday that I can remember this house and this display, especially that snowman. It was really impressive. The lights really glowed. It was really quite dazzling. Next slide, if you would, please. This is Mark and Faith Seibel's house in 1994 on Doris Street on the west side. He won for best use of light that year. And that tree there, or at least a cut down version of it, is currently on display on the south end of the market on South Water Street. And if you go by, it's like watching, like a spotlight. It's really quite amazing to get up that close. Next picture, please. Whoops, we jumped one. There we go. This is on North Avenue, and I'm trying to think who's the name of this. This was the Ed Call home, and in 1994 he won first prize for most religious. Again, this is another house that I can so well remember. They had very fine decorations. There used to be whole neighborhoods that would club together and really try to outdo each other. When we were younger, when I was younger, North Avenue was the place to go to see a dazzling display of lights. Western Avenue was also a nice spot to see a lot of different light displays. Next slide then. On North Washington Street, from 1976 until the early part of this century, they used to put lumineers out all along the street. And that was really quite an impressive sight to look at those and see those. It really was very special. They don't do that anymore, unfortunately. Next, please. Now, businesses, of course, did a lot of decorating to attract customers. This is a picture of Coughlin's Coffee Shop on South 3rd Street from the 1960s. Today, this is an insurance building. You can see, very simple, little frosting on the windows and the swags there, but it was an attractive look, and it, I'm sure, garnered customers. You all know, I think, Mike Coughlin, who was the manager of Hardee's in town, and that's his people. Next, please. This is from last year, and this is the Schenf building, and it is decorated again this year, similar to this. I have to say, none of our stores on Main Street were ever decorated like this growing up. They had stuff in the windows, but they never had this year outdoor lighting like this that I can recall. And it's really very, very pretty.
Who does that, Bill?
Well, I think the Bill Lindborg has a crew that decorates that up.
That's beautiful.
Now, some of you will remember the Hofmeister carolers. The mechanical carolers that we used to have in the front windows that would, their heads would move up and down, their upper torsos would. That was something. A lot of the jewelry stores had little mechanical displays in their windows. But the one display I remember the most was at the National Supermarket, which is today Breslow's. They used to have, around Christmas time, a 7-Up display with a mechanical Santa Claus that would pop up and down out of a chimney. And how well I remember that. It's just goofy that's the one thing that sticks with you. There you are. Even our public library, next picture please, is decorated. It was decorated last year and decorated this year. Now, our library is one of the few stores, or one of the few businesses, if you will, on Main Street that has always had a Christmas tree inside from the 1920s, probably even before that onward. And in many cases, it was sort of a communal Christmas tree. Next picture, if you would, please, Mr. Riedl. This is the library Christmas tree set up in the old children's library section in 1931. And again, you see that heavily laden tinsel on the tree there. They still have a Christmas tree. Just about every school had a Christmas tree at one time. My father was always fond of telling the story of how, when they went to Lincoln School, the original one before it burned down in 1946, they used to have a Christmas tree on each of the levels of the school. And a bunch of the guys put my Uncle Alan into a wastebasket and shoved him up and down the hallways. And unfortunately, they shoved him too hard and shoved him right into the Christmas tree, and it tipped over and destroyed it. And he had to then go home and explain to his parents, my grandparents, why they had to pay for a new Christmas tree and ornaments for the school. It was not a very Merry Christmas that year. Next slide, please. But this is how I think of Christmas in Watertown. Not that I was born when this picture was taken, which was in November of 1953. But this is what I think of. Just look at that crowd of people behind the ladies. Look at that throng. This is how it was every Friday night on Main Street. In particular at Christmas time, all trying to get into Penny's and Kresge's and Woolworths and the Gamble store and Fisher's and Draheim's and whatever, all of them trying to get there. I love this picture. It appeared on the front page of the Daily Times in late November, about the last day in November in 1953. It personifies small town America. It's a Wonderful Life. It just says Christmas in Watertown. Next picture, please. Now these next couple of pictures are just some advertisements from 1895, because as the years rolled by, businesses had to compete, and they began to take out large ads in the newspaper. This is from the Salick Company, which was our pioneer jewelry store. Cleaning a watch was 50 cents, which sounds cheap, but imagine having 50 cents in 1895. It really, that was a lot of money in those days as well. Next slide, please. This is the Schenf Brothers. This is a Christmas ad. And you can see here what sort of things you could buy at Christmas time. Christmas books, picture books, holiday handkerchiefs, mufflers, fancy pillows, novelty goods such as photo albums, picture frames, toilet cases, etc. Christmas clothing, of course. And next slide. And this is the very first ad taken out by Fisher's in 1895. And this was their first Christmas sale. Now, every store wanted one of those dollars. They wanted people to come in. And so every store began to come up with gimmicks. None more so than the stores in Milwaukee. And the biggest store, one of the biggest stores, in Milwaukee was Schuster's Department Store. They had their own Christmas parade, but they had something else. They had the greatest gimmick that you could ever want to have. Next slide, please. They had Billy the Brownie. Billy the Brownie began in 1917 as a newspaper column that would run from Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve, where Billy would answer letters and kids would write in with their Christmas lists and what have you. But even that, and that was good, but it got better in 1931. Next slide, please. When they began to broadcast over WTMJ. Every day or every week, I don't know, I'm not sure if it was weekly, daily or weekly. It was daily, okay. Daily, from Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve, you listen to Captain Larry Tyke and Billy the Brownie talking about Christmas preparations, how Santa Claus was getting along. They'd read Christmas letters, from the children. They'd read a book. They'd read a story. And this is where my father lived in abject terror. Because the only way to get Billy the Brownie to open his Christmas book is that you had to stand in front of your radio and you had to say, "I've been good." And sometimes the book wouldn't open. And my father lived in terror because he knew that if that book didn't open, it was because of him. The show ran from 1931 until 1955, and it was hugely popular. There are still a handful of original recordings that exist yet, but they're all dated from the 1950s, and it's fascinating to listen to them. Next slide, please. So, of course, every other store began to co-opt this idea. Here is Gimby and Ellie, which was the story of two friendly elephants that was sponsored by Gimbals. It was held over WISN every day at 5 p.m. This was an ad from 1944. Next slide. And even the Boston store, they had a show called Streamlined Fairy Tales, which was to grab the children who would then, of course, get their parents to come in. But the Boston store had something that no other store in Wisconsin had. They had Santa Claus. But not from the North Pole. From South 3rd Street in Watertown. Next slide, please. They had Santa Claus played by Alton Gritzner. Fats Gritzner. Now that is his daughter Myrna Kennedy holding a picture of her father as Santa Claus. And right next to it, by the way, is the famous jar of the famous Gritzner relish, which he was famous for, which the family refuses on point of death to give up the recipe. He was Santa Claus at the Boston store every year from 1939 to 1957. And he would go down, take the train to Watertown, and he would arrive in Milwaukee, like the day after Thanksgiving, and he would be met at the train by officials from the Boston store and children, and there would be a grand parade all the way up to the Boston store. And that's where he would hold court. Fats Gritzner ran one of the first drive-in food stands in Watertown on South 3rd Street, the Maple Leaf Barbecue. He also owned the Eastgate Inn. He was a magician known as Nova the Great, or Nova the Magnificent, and he was an alderman. So he was quite a man of many hats. Next slide, please. Now children, generally speaking, liked Santa Claus. This is a picture from 1969. See the smiling faces? They liked Santa Claus. Some were a little bit intimidated, but they liked them. Oh, darn it.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, now we'll go ahead one. But not all children like Santa Claus. This is 2.5-year-old Joe Ross in 1969, or no, 67 rather, 1967. He did not like Santa Claus. And Santa Claus was played by Don Lenius at this time. And from what I'm told, Don Lenius was a very nice gentleman, so go and figure, Now, Santa Claus, when I was a child, came into town on the back of a fire truck. But in 1928, next picture, He came in on a special Spirit of Watertown plane. This is taken, by the way, in Memorial Park, which is where our City Hall is today. Yes, it was a lean year for Santa Claus. Next picture, please. In 1993, he came in on a horse-drawn sleigh at the end of our Christmas parade, which somebody asked me today how long we've had Christmas parades. And I think it's been since the 1980s, maybe about 30 years. But however he got to town, he could always be found in one spot. Next picture, please. In his home, located on North 3rd Street, right next to the Gas and Electric Company building. I can remember being in this house. It was a simple little house. And there would be a lineup around the block waiting to see Santa Claus. No matter how cold it was, how much snow was flying, kids had to see him. Nowadays, I don't see him in the house very often. I certainly don't see the line of kids. But unfortunately, these days, and it's a sad commentary on our lives, we have the children today, young people today, whatever, have all become self-imposed, solitary, self-imposed solitary confinement. With television 24 hours a day and computers and cell phones, etc., etc., they no longer have the need to go out and intermingle with people, and they've lost a lot of the fantasy. I love this. Next slide, please. This is a color picture from 1969 showing one of our city buses next to the Gas and Electric Company building.
That was a new one.
And in back there you see the Santa Claus house in color. Very simple. It was white with a gingerbread man there and candy canes. Now, of course, next slide, please. Santa Claus can be found at the head of the river walkway when he's there, in a heated home, lovely appointed, quite a nice place. Santa Claus also could be found at, like I say, Kuzel's, and at Albrecht's Paint Store, which was Luna's Market on South 3rd Street. He was at Coast to Coast in their basement toy department. He appeared even at Walmart when Walmart first opened. I think he might have been at Woolworths and Kresge's, but I can never remember that. And he might have been at, what was the other store I was thinking of? Oh, darn. Oh, Value Village. He might have been there too, but I'm not sure. Next slide, please. Now, we've been talking about secular things, the commercial side. We need to remind ourselves that cutting out all the commercialism, Christmas is a religious time, a time for reminding us that it is the birth of our Lord. Now, churches, of course, got on the bandwagon as far as decorations, usually rather austere, but sometimes these were the only Christmas trees that families would see. This is the Moravian Church around 1900. You can see the green swags and the Christmas tree up there near the altar. Next picture. This is St. Mark's. In about 1944, this is my church. The sheer magnitude of this Christmas tree is staggering. If you've been in St. Mark's, you know we have a high ceiling in there. I mean, this tree is massive, and it is fully decorated from stem to stern. I mean, I don't know what sort of ladders you had to get up there, but it was amazing. And tinsel and everything else. And then below it, where the supports are, there's sort of a triptych affair that hides the support, which has scenes from the Nativity. But something else I want to point out in this picture. Off to the left-hand side, you see a plaque with stars on it. This shows that this picture was taken during the middle of World War II. And they marked all of the members of the church who were serving in the armed forces. Just about every church, every club, any place that you would gather had similar displays. And it was a very solemn reminder to think of others at that time. Now, imagine if you were a member of St. Mark's School or you went to Sunday school and you had to appear in their Christmas service program. You would meet in the basement of the church, and then you would be strictly told how to act, and you would be marched into church, into your pews that were assigned to your classes. Rise from the pews and turn to face the rest of the congregation and say your pieces or sing your songs. And then afterwards, you would be marched back down to the basement. I took part in several of these services when I was a child, and the one thing I looked forward to at the end of the service was the goodie bag.
Yeah. Very nice.
And it was such a simple little thank you gift, but it meant so much. What did you have in those bags? You had peanuts in the shell, you had a popcorn ball, you had hard candy, ribbon candy, and you had sometimes that my father just loved and I hated it, this weird chocolate sponge candy.
Yeah.
Dark chocolate with this hard spongy stuff inside that was like eating a Brillo pad, you know? But he loved it. Sometimes you'd find taffy, but then the other thing you would find in there usually was an orange.
Orange or apple, yeah.
Orange or an apple. Now, you think, why would anybody put an orange or an apple in? Remember, you couldn't always get fresh fruit year-round. Of course, you couldn't get fresh fruit year-round in those days. So to have an orange for your very own was something very, very special indeed. Now, Mr. Racer, you're kind of the historian as far as our goodie bags. St. Mark's still does it, and St. John's. But I don't know, do you know offhand if any other churches still do it in town?
St. Matthew's and Oconomowoc.
They do?
St. Paul's in Ixonia does, St. John's in Ixonia.
Oh, okay.
Calvary Baptist in Watertown, Good Shepherd.
Well, it's good to know then that
The bags vary. Some of the churches have modernized the contents a little bit, but they still give them, some of the churches where it's smaller, the bags are a little more plentiful because there's less children to cover. And I haven't researched that. I wrote an article on it about 20 years ago. And at that time, there were still a couple thousand bags prepared at Christmas in the city. And I don't think any of those churches have stopped. But some of the civic organizations have stopped.
It's good to know, though, that some of the traditions are still going on. Now, Christmas also came to Northwestern College. Next slide, please. This is Northwestern College, showing the gymnasium, the old gymnasium there in about 1928. It came there, but it came in an odd way. And I mean that when I show you this next picture. Now, this is taken about 1925. And my question is this a Christmas party? Is this a play? Or is this some sort of fraternal initiation? Now listen, now look at this closely. First of all, there's a tree over there. And you can see there's a steam pipe above it. And hanging off of it is some of those paper bells and some swags. And there's Santa Claus. By the way, he's wearing a trench coat. Word to the wise. If you run into a Santa Claus wearing a trench coat,
Run.
yeah, run as fast as you can. He's not Santa Claus. Do not let your children go near Santa Claus in a trench coat. Do not let your wives and sweethearts go near Santa Claus in a trench coat. And you'll also notice something else. Notice something else. The young lady there.
Yeah, why is it?
If you look close at the young lady, you'll realize that it is not in fact a young lady. It's a young gentleman. Because you know, in the old days, men were men, and sometimes they were women too.
So was a play.
I don't know.
Wasn't Northwestern though, wasn't that all male at one point?
They had a co-ed as far as the high school section, the prep school section, but seminary was all men, generally
So maybe
speaking.
this was a picture from the seminary.
Well, and I'm sure it's something very innocent, but look at, there's Groucho Marx off to the side
It's
there.
a very
you know?
big looking mustache, so.
And Adolf Hitler holding the cane, you know, so I mean, you don't wonder what's going on there, you
Now,
know.
what's he got under his arm? It's cane.
It's either a cane or it's a
Ready,
I thought
Bob?
it was a pool.
riding crop. Could be a pulku, I suppose, you know. Nice little Tiffany style lamp there, so just odd. It came.
Is it a play of some sort?
I'm going to kind of hope it is.
Yeah.
That guy's getting awful familiar with that other fellow there, you know, so anyway. Next slide, please.
That was good.
Let's clean our palate. Now, there were tragedies. There have always been a certain amount of sadness that goes on at this time of year. And one of the biggest fires in our city's history happened in 1946 on December 18th. In sub-zero temperatures, the Bittner and Tetzloff drugstore, which is today the site of the Main Street Cafe on the corner of 2nd and Main, a fire broke out in the basement of unknown origin, and by midday it had consumed most of the building. 6 fire departments from around the area were summoned to battle. Kern's men's store, right next door, was burned out, and Keck's furniture store, which was right next to Kern's, was in danger of being burned, but fortunately the fire was contained by the time it really did any damage. The water, it was so cold that the water practically froze as it came out of the hoses. It was a total loss. Next slide. Here you see another picture. Even our mayor at the time, Byron Wackett, took a turn at the hose to help put the fire out. Next slide. But thankfully, most things are happy memories. This is a particularly happy memory for me, because this is my house in 1965. And as I look at this picture, I am instantly a 4-year-old boy again. I can remember the curtains, that couch, that hassock, the rug on the floor, that rag rug underneath that little rocker. In particular, I remember that fake fireplace, because how did Santa Claus get into a house that didn't have a fireplace? So my mother and father bought a fake cardboard fireplace. That tree there with the few ornaments that were on there, and you see those blurs? Those are those really big, what you would use more or less outdoors these days, with those really big lights that got kind of hot after a point. But that's what I remember. That was my childhood. So, next slide please. As you are wending your way home to your snug little residences, and this is a house on 8th and Kleinman Street, with lovely snow. Next slide please. You'll want to spend time with your family. And here we have, again, the children of Mr. and Mrs. Alex Krieger. You will note the young girl there, Jenny Krieger. I love that expression. That is perfect contentment on the part of a child. As if she is saying, I've got mine, now you go and get yours. You know? It's a wonderful picture.
Elephant's name baby.
And that's quite a lot of toys too for that time period. I mean, this is their own Christmas tree as opposed to the family Christmas tree. And if you look down the steps, you see a lot of dolls, some books, some games, quite a lot of stuff. A little Skittle game there. Next slide, please. And here, of course, we have Evelyn Jones Kreitzman in front of her tree in 1916 with her dollies and her little wicker chair there, little wicker rocker. Next slide. So you'll be making your way home soon. This is a little evocative picture from the winter time, taken about the 1940s, of a young woman walking towards down College Avenue or thereabouts. And so my wish to you all, next slide, is that you hang your stockings in hopes that St. Nicholas soon will be there. And I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you. Before you go starting off and getting out because you think the timing is right, you can just skip out. I have one more thing, something very special to share with you. Some of you have probably seen this before, but I'm hoping it's new to most of you. There was a movie made in Watertown. There were several movies made in Watertown, but this one in particular was made in about 1958, and it was shot inside the Octagon House, and the exterior shots were done on Conwalk Avenue in front of lawyer Paul Hibbard's home. It's called Christmas on Grandfather's Farm. And it features all members of the Watertown Curtain Club, such as Carl Collada and Margaret Luxinger and Esther Winogren and Erwin Keepman. It's a beautiful little film. It's very short, and I want to share that with you now. So, Mr. Riedl, when are you on your own good time?
Still wintry night, a home with gleaming lights. These things are part of Christmas today. as they were yesterday. Let's go back to Grandfather's house for Christmas. A Christmas near the end of the last century. Grandpa Bradford's place is a big, comfortable farmhouse with plenty of room for all the Bradfords. Grandma Bradford has been busy for days preparing for the family reunion. Seems like there's no end of cooking and baking to be done for Christmas dinner tomorrow. Grandma's eldest daughter, Alice, does the more creative work in the family.
That's Esther Winogrand.
Like making ornaments for the Christmas tree. Old-fashioned ornaments for an old-fashioned Christmas. Today, the kitchen is the center of activity. But tomorrow, the parlor will ring with the shouts of Bradford grandchildren around the tree. The family reunion has already begun. John, the youngest son, arrived this afternoon from the city. There's no place like home. It was a long ride on the train, almost 8 hours. It's good to be home, in the midst of familiar sights and sounds.
There, that'll hold it till morning.
I should think so. Now what about the parlor?
The woods of the fireplace. I light the fire first thing in the morning, right after milk.
Alice like the trees out there trimming that Christmas tree. Alice?
Yes, Mother?
Did you find the store ornaments?
Yes, I've got the candles and candle holders and everything. I'll be finished with the tree pretty soon.
It seems like there's still a million things to do.
Sure smells good in here, Mother.
I feel by that you mean you want a cookie. All right. I'll make her a cup of coffee, too. That'll work out. Land sakes, I thought you were never coming in out of that barn.
Can't blame him, Mother. He's pretty excited about that present he's got for Josh out in the barn.
Well, Josh has wanted one for such a long time.
I sure hope he likes that coat.
Oh, John, I sure remember the Christmas that you were 10 and you got one. You couldn't even sleep or eat.
I know, I'll never forget that Christmas. Say, is Alice still out in the parlor?
Gee, it looks beautiful, Alice.
Thanks, John. I hope the children like it.
Of course they will.
All done?
Just about. I have all the presents wrapped. This one's yours, by the way. Then I have to finish the mittens for Peter, and that will be that.
Alice, John, come and have a cup of coffee.
Family and home and Christmas Eve. A time for sharing love. A time for being together. Tomorrow the rest of the Bradford children and grandchildren will come. But now comes the quiet time before the big day. No Christmas Eve would be complete without Grandpa reading the Bible account of the first Christmas.
And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, For behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day, in the city of David, a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And there shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
That was beautiful, Pop.
Yes, and it always seems new and beautiful, year after year. Well, it's getting late. I guess we better turn in.
I'm just about finished.
I'm ready.
There, it's done. I'll wrap them tomorrow.
I suppose Jane and Clem will come first, seeing how they're the closest. Then Dave and Mary, they'll be driving out right after church, of course.
Christmas morning. And as usual, good old Major pulls Dave Bradford and his young family to the Bradford farm where Dave was born. They're the last to arrive. The others are already inside and waiting. The 7-mile ride has been cold for Mary Bradford, but it's been fun for the youngsters. That's Susan, the youngest. Priscilla's well bundled up. Joshua is the oldest of Dave's children.
My, but it's cold out there. Susie, how you have grown, honey. You too, Priscilla. You know your cousins are here. And Maggie? Yes, and Peter. Now you just walk in and find them. Merry. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Mother.
Josh, hurry up. Dave, bring all those presents.
Yes, we're coming.
Josh, Merry Christmas, Grandma. So good to have you here.
Merry Christmas, Mother.
Merry Christmas, son. Cold coming?
Mighty cold out. Well, I heard someone.
Uncle John.
Oh, Josh, Merry Christmas, Dave. Merry Christmas, John. How are you, young fella? Lend me a hand here. I've got one that's Major.
Can I help put Major in for carry?
Well, Josh. Let's you and I carry the presents in.
Yes, you help. Then you go find your cousin. Is Peter here? Yes, he's here. You go on out and find him.
So the reunion is on. The Shelbys are here. Aunt Jane and Uncle Clem. And now aunts and uncles and cousins can all get reacquainted. Jane Shelby and Mary Bradford haven't seen each other for months. There's so many things to talk about. There are many things to see, too. And things happening in every room of the big house.
Golly, no end to these presents, Clem. Well, let's put them under the tree.
What a pretty dress, Priscilla. Thank you. Can I open your present?
Open the presents, Susan, dear? No, not now. Raffle comes done. And then we can open all of them.
Well, I wonder what Pete's pa.
Yes, and that husband of mine.
Shall I go out in the barn and see Grandma? Oh, no, Josh. I expect he's just showing your father some of his new harness.
Josh, how would you like to have Grandma for a cookie?
Oh, yes, of course. Right there in that brown jar, Josh. And take a few extra with you for Priscilla and Peter and the rest.
been stabled and fed.
You sure love that old horse, don't you? I suppose you'd like to have one of your own someday.
That would be something. Is that Grandpa? Come on, we're waiting for you. Can you pass out the presents now, can you?
Certainly can. Priscilla, my little girl.
Light the tree, light the tree.
And now, old-fashioned candlelight for an old-fashioned Christmas. They'll enjoy it while they can, for the candles will not be allowed to burn too long. And where is the child who has not loved this moment at Christmas time? Why, the tree is almost as exciting as the gifts themselves. Grandfathers are pretty popular in most families, and Grandpa Bradford is no exception. The family wouldn't think of exchanging the gifts themselves. Grandpa has to pass out each one. That's part of the Christmas of the farm. And who can say which is the happier, the receiver or the giver? A fountain pen, one of those new ones that carries its own ink. Now, what do you suppose Priscilla wants most of all? Will their little girl like it? Toys and Christmas go together. The porcelain doll came from a city far away. But not all the gifts come from stores. Many were made at home. Knitting a pair of mittens for a nephew can bring a wonderful reward. A tablecloth crocheted with loving care makes it more precious somehow. And what will it be for the youngest child? What is Susan hoping for? Of course, a teddy bear. For Grandma, a shawl to keep and treasure. These are gifts that carry with them a family's love. Some gifts bring with them a part of the world beyond this house. That's one of the wonders of the age, a phonograph. Came all the way from Chicago. This will mean music and song for the whole family. Hours of pleasure in the quiet evenings. This will be pleasure too. A sled for Peter. Straight from Grandpa's workshop. And for Josh, something very dear to his heart. A book about a horse, Black Beauty. And he is a beauty. What a wonderful morning, giving, sharing, being together.
Dave. Dave.
Yes, Pa?
It's getting a little chilly in here, don't you think? You'd better go out and get that gate log for the fire.
Yes, I'll get it right away.
Well, I guess that's all the presents. That is almost all. There's one more present that was too big to put under the tree. You all know that Josh had a birthday last month. Now that he's 10 years old, he's old enough to have this something. It is a sort of a combined birthday and Christmas gift. Of course, when Peter's 10 years old, I aim to give him the same thing. Josh, go to the window now.
I would never expect that.
It seems that once in every child's life comes the time when he gets the one gift he treasures above all others. And for Josh, this is the one. Probably the whole family will want to help Josh pick a name for his colt. Oh, what fun Josh will have riding him in the spring. Josh never dreamed that the best Christmas present of all was in Grandpa's barn.
Well, he sure was a happy boy. Yes, and there'll be no living with Peter now until he's old enough to have a coat. Well, now maybe we can get this dinner finished. Alice, would you go out and pack and get that pitcher of cream? And Mary, would you please cut those pies? Oh, the food.
Let's see. The children will be here.
Here, let me help you with that, Alice.
Now that was your Uncle Jeff, the one that was in the Civil War.
My, this fresh coffee smells good.
No, Susan. Don't eat the cookie off the tree. Take this one.
There she is, Priscilla. She's ready for a nap. Let's go ask your mother to play the piano for us. All right.
Well, I call this customer on a telephone.
On the telephone of over 300 miles?
Well, sure, I'd call further than that.
Well, right here.
It's the common thing, Paul. I'll bet one day you'll have the telephone right in this house. Just like the city folks. Sure, and then you can call the John most anytime. What something does the general...
Now let's see. Here's one I think you'll like.
Our Heavenly Father, For these gifts we are about to receive, we thank thee. We ask thy blessing upon this house and upon these thy servants, gathered together through thy bounteous guidance and love. Amen.
Gathered together for Christmas, 3 generations of a happy family. Parents who have worked to make their dreams come true, and children who brighten the lives of all. This was Christmas yesterday, when life on Grandfather's farm was a little slower, perhaps a little gentler. A life we call old-fashioned. Life that was part of an old-fashioned American Christmas.